a werewolf shifter romance audiobook written by Mr. V. Chapter 1. The iron bars were slick with condensation, but Kira had stopped noticing the damp 2 nights ago. Now there was only the waiting, the kind that came from knowing your death would arrive with the sunrise. For days she had been here in the cells beneath Blackthorn Keep. For days since the guards dragged her from the healing ward where she tended the sick, her apron still stained with blood she swore belonged to no murder victim. Commander Garrett was dead. That much was certain. His body had been discovered at the entrance to the infirmary, his chest torn open, his blood pooling across the threshold. And Kira, foolish and well-meaning, had tried to save him. She had pressed her hands into the wound, attempted to channel healing energy, even as she recognized it was far too late. That was how they found her, kneeling over a corpse, her hands crimson, looking exactly like the killer they needed her to be. She had tried to explain, tried to tell them she had returned from gathering herbs in the eastern woods to find him already dying, already gone. But who would believe a healer? Who would believe someone from the lowest caste when faced with the death of the High Commander's most trusted warrior? Kira was nobody, insignificant and powerless, when measured against the loss of such an important man. Her younger brother, Marcus, had been arrested too. Her baby brother, only 15, who understood nothing of court intrigue or power games, who had done nothing wrong except live in the same dwelling as she did. They had taken him to a different cell, and she had not seen him since. The guards refused to answer her questions, refused to tell her anything except that they both would die at first light. A public display in the keep's central square. Dawn was approaching soon. Kira could feel it in her bones, though no natural light penetrated this deep beneath the fortress. The execution was scheduled for sunrise, a demonstration of what happened to healers who dared raise a hand against their protectors. Except she had never raised a hand. She had never hurt anyone in her 24 years of existence. Violence went against everything she believed. She was a healer, someone who mended broken bones and soothed fevers, who tried to ease suffering wherever she found it. She had shifted into her wolf form only twice in her life, and both times had been agony. Her small russet wolf weak and sickly, confirming what everyone already knew. She was from the lowest bloodline. She was nothing. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, multiple sets, measured and purposeful. Kira did not look up. She had learned not to hope. But then the cell door opened and torchlight flooded in, and a voice spoke that made her blood turn to ice. "Leave us." It was not a request. The guards withdrew immediately, their footsteps fading into silence. Kira finally raised her head and found herself staring at High Commander Thorn himself. He was massive. That was her first coherent thought. She had glimpsed him from a distance before, of course, when she worked in the keep's healing ward, but never this close. Never in a confined space where his presence seemed to consume every available inch. He stood well over 6.5 feet tall, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his silver hair pulled back in the style of the ruling class, his beard trimmed with military precision. But it was his eyes that held her. Violet, intense, fixed on her with an expression she could not decipher. "Stand," he commanded. Kira stood, though her legs shook. She had not eaten in 4 days, had barely slept. Her auburn hair was matted with cell filth, her healing robes torn and stained. She must look like exactly what they claimed she was, a murderer, a criminal. "You claim you did not kill Garrett," Thorn said. It was not a question. "I did not, High Commander." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I found him dying. I tried to help. A healer tried to help a warrior." His tone was flat, unreadable. Garrett was trained in combat for over 40 years. He survived the southern campaigns. He killed 18 rogues single-handedly at the siege of Irongate. And you expect me to believe he was overcome by someone from the lowest caste? "I do not expect you to believe anything, High Commander," Kira said quietly. "I only know what is true. I did not kill him." Thorn studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, and she forced herself not to flinch. He circled her slowly, and she felt his gaze on every inch of her, assessing, calculating. "You worked in my keep," he said. "For how long?" 6 years, High Commander. "And in 6 years, has anyone reported any violence from you? Any aggression?" "No, High Commander." "Have you ever shifted in anger? Ever lost control?" "No, High Commander. I barely shift at all." "Why not?" Kira hesitated. It was not something she spoke about openly. "It hurts," she admitted. "The transformation. My wolf is small and weak. It brings me only pain." Show me. The words hit her like a physical blow. High Commander. Tomorrow at dawn you die, Thorn said bluntly. But I do not execute my people without certainty of their guilt. Something about this does not make sense. Garrett was strong. You are not. So I will see for myself what you are capable of. He moved to the door, then paused. You will transform before the court. If your wolf is as weak as you claim, if you are truly incapable of killing a warrior of his caliber, then we will continue the investigation. If you refuse, he turned back to face her, his violet eyes merciless. Your brother dies now, and you follow him at dawn. Kira's heart stopped. Marcus, your brother. Yes. Thorn's expression revealed nothing. Make your choice, healer. Transform and prove your weakness, or condemn you both. He left before she could respond, the door clanging shut behind him. Kira sank back against the wall, her mind reeling. Transform. Before the court. Before everyone. Her transformations were humiliating, painful things. Her wolf was barely larger than a common forest creature, russet and unremarkable, so pathetically weak. Every time she shifted, it felt like bones grinding and muscles tearing, only to produce something small and pitiful. She had stopped trying after the second time, had learned to suppress that part of herself, to live as close to human as a shifter could manage. But for Marcus, she would do it. For Marcus, she would endure any humiliation. The guards came for her an hour later. They hauled her up from the cells, through corridors she knew from her work, but everything looked different now, threatening. The other healers averted their eyes as she passed. No one wanted to be associated with a murderer. They brought her to the keep's central square, and her breath caught. The space was packed with people. Hundreds of shifters from the court, nobles and warriors, high caste and mid-caste, all gathered to witness her final moments. Torches blazed against the pre-dawn darkness, casting dancing shadows across stone walls that had stood for ages. At the center of it all was the seat of judgment, carved from a single massive piece of obsidian that predated even the keep itself. It was said to be older than memory, placed here by ancient magic, and seated upon it was Thorn, the High Commander, watching her with those unreadable violet eyes. The guards forced her to her knees in the center of the square. The crowd pressed close, their voices a low murmur of anticipation. Kira searched the faces desperately for Marcus, but she could not find her brother in the sea of strangers. Kira of House Ashwood, you stand accused of the murder of Garrett, warrior and advisor to the High Commander. The voice belonged to an older man she recognized as the keep's chief steward. The High Commander in his mercy has granted you the opportunity to prove your innocence. You will shift before this court. If your wolf is incapable of such violence, your sentence will be postponed pending further investigation. If you refuse, or if your wolf shows capability for murder, the sentence will be carried out immediately. Do you understand? I understand, Kira said. Her voice sounded very small in the vast square. Then shift. Kira looked up at the sky. The moon was still visible, though dawn was creeping at the edges of the horizon. The moon had always made it worse, had always made the transformation more agonizing. But there was no choice now. For Marcus. Everything for Marcus. She closed her eyes and reached for that buried part of herself, the wolf she had tried so hard to ignore. Pain hit her immediately, sharp and searing, radiating from her core outward. She gasped, her hands hitting the stone, her body convulsing. The crowd's murmur grew louder, excited, anticipating the spectacle. But something was different this time. The pain was there, yes, but beneath it was something else. Something vast and powerful. Something that had been sleeping for so long she had forgotten it existed. It surged upward, responding to her desperation, to her need, to the moon hanging full and bright above her. Kira screamed as her bones began to break and reform. But they did not shrink. They expanded. Her body did not diminish. It grew. The crowd's murmur died into shocked silence. When the transformation finally completed, Kira stood on 4 legs and opened eyes that saw the world with crystalline clarity. She was huge, as large as any high-caste wolf she had ever seen, maybe larger. And her fur was not russet. It was crimson, pure, gleaming crimson that seemed to catch the moonlight and reflect it back 100-fold. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. And then something impossible happened. The seat of judgment began to crack. The sound was like thunder, sharp and deafening in the silent square. Fissures spread across the ancient obsidian, and from within them, light poured forth. Crimson light, the same shade as Kira's fur, spilling across the seat's surface in veins of pure radiance. Someone in the crowd screamed. Then an old woman pushed forward, her white hair wild, her amber eyes wide with recognition and terror. Kira recognized her. Nessa, the keep's master healer, ancient and wise and rarely seen outside her chambers. Bloodborne. Nessa's voice rang out across the square, cracked with age but powerful. The Crimson One. The lost line returns. Chaos erupted. Half the court dropped to their knees, heads bowed as if compelled by instinct. The other half recoiled in fear, stumbling over each other in their haste to get away. Voices rose in confusion, in terror, in awe. But Kira barely heard them. She was focused on Thorn. The High Commander had not moved from his seat, but his expression had changed. The violet eyes that had been unreadable were now sharp with something that might have been recognition, might have been fear, might have been hunger. The Crimson bloodline had been destroyed 23 years ago. Everyone knew the story. The traitor ruling family, executed for conspiracy against the Council of Commanders. Every single member of the house put to death. Their line extinguished. Their lands and titles scattered. There should not be any survivors. There could not be any survivors. But the seat knew. The ancient obsidian that had stood silent for a generation was reacting now, recognizing the blood of its true rulers. And everyone in the square knew what that meant. Kira, the healer, the nobody, the accused murderer, was royalty. She carried the blood of the Crimson Queens. And everything, absolutely everything, had just changed. Chapter 2. The tower chamber was nothing like the cells. Kira stood at the narrow window, staring out at the keep grounds below, trying to understand how her world had shattered and reformed in the span of a single night. She was no longer in chains, no longer condemned to death, but she was not free either. The door was guarded. Her movements were restricted to this single chamber, circular and isolated at the top of the western tower. The transformation back to human form had been easier than any she had experienced before, as if her body finally recognized what it was meant to be. But the memory of her crimson wolf remained vivid in her mind. The size of her, the power, the way the ancient seat had responded to her presence. Even now, hours later, she could hardly believe it had happened. The door opened without warning. Kira spun, her heart racing. But it was not guards who entered. It was Nessa, the old healer, her arms full of clean linens and what appeared to be medical supplies. Behind her came two younger women carrying a wooden tub and buckets of steaming water. "The High Commander has ordered that you be examined," Nessa said without preamble, "and that you be made presentable. Sit." Kira sat on the edge of the narrow bed while the attendants prepared a bath. She watched Nessa carefully. The old woman's face was weathered, lined with decades of life, but her amber eyes were sharp and calculating. She had been the one to cry out that word in the square. Bloodborne. Once the attendants departed, closing the door behind them, Nessa turned to Kira with an expression that bordered on wonder. "Strip and get in the bath," she commanded. "We need to talk, and there is little time before others come demanding answers you do not yet have." Kira obeyed, too exhausted and confused to argue. The hot water was heaven against her filthy skin, washing away days of cell grime. Nessa worked methodically, checking her vitals, examining her eyes, her hands, the base of her skull where fine hairs grew. "How much do you remember of your childhood?" Nessa asked quietly. "Very little," Kira admitted. "Fragments. Nightmares. I remember a different place, larger than the cottage. Voices shouting. Flames. Someone hiding me in a trunk." She hesitated. "My mother, I think. A woman with dark hair holding me, telling me to be quiet." Nessa nodded slowly. "You were 2, perhaps 3 years old when it happened. Young enough to remember almost nothing, but old enough that complete forgetting would be strange. The mind protects us from trauma in mysterious ways." "When what happened?" Kira demanded. "What is Bloodborne? Why did the seat react to me?" "Because you are one of them," Nessa said simply. She pulled a stool close to the tub and sat with a heavy sigh. "The Crimson bloodline. The original ruling family of Blackthorn. They governed this territory for 800 years before the current regime. Your ancestors built this keep, forged the seat from sacred obsidian, established the laws that still govern us today." Kira's hands gripped the edge of the tub. "But they were traitors. They were executed for conspiracy against the commanders." "That is what the history scrolls say now," Nessa agreed. "But I am old, child. Old enough to remember when those scrolls were rewritten. 23 years ago, the Crimson family was declared treasonous. Evidence was presented before the Council of Commanders. Documents showing plans to overthrow the established order, to seize absolute power, to enslave the lower castes under Crimson rule. The entire family was executed publicly in this very square. Men, women, youths, all put to death for their crimes. But, Kira prompted, hearing the unspoken contradiction. But the youngest children were spared, Nessa said quietly. The God's law is absolute on this point. Any child who has not yet experienced their first transformation, which occurs between ages 12 and 15, is protected by divine decree. To kill such a child is to invite a curse upon yourself and your bloodline, a curse that extends for 7 generations. Even those who orchestrated the executions feared that ancient law. She leaned forward. So the infants and toddlers were spared, sold to families far from court, stripped of their names and histories, raised to believe they were common. The goal was that they would never know what they were, would live and die as healers or laborers, never suspecting their heritage. The water had gone cold, but Kira barely noticed. You are saying I am one of those children. The seat does not lie, Nessa said. Only true crimson blood can make it respond. The sacred obsidian recognizes its rightful rulers. When you transformed, when your true nature was revealed, it knew. We all knew. She leaned closer. Your eyes alone should have given you away. That shade of green, emerald and bright. It was the mark of the crimson bloodline, distinct from any other family in the territory. I wondered when I saw you working in the healing ward, why no one else noticed. But people see what they expect to see, and no one expected royalty to be tending their wounds. Kira climbed out of the bath on shaking legs. Nessa wrapped her in clean linen, then helped her into a simple dress that had been laid out on the bed. It was finer than anything she had ever worn, soft fabric that did not scratch, dyed a pale gray that brought out the green of her eyes. My brother, Kira said suddenly. Marcus, he was arrested with me. Where is he? In another cell, separated from you. Nessa's expression softened slightly. He is your brother-in-love, child, but not in blood. The family who bought you, who raised you as their own. They had a son 9 years after they took you in. Marcus knows no other life, no other family. He believes you to be his true sister. The revelation should have hurt more than it did. But Kira had always known, on some level, that she was different, that she did not quite fit with the family who raised her. They had been kind enough, but distant. And when they died of plague 4 years ago, it had been Kira who supported herself and Marcus through her work in the healing ward. He is still my brother, Kira said firmly. Blood or not. I need to know he is safe. For now he is. The High Commander has forbidden anyone from touching him until the investigation is complete. Nessa stood, gathering her supplies. But understand this, your existence changes everything. There are many in this court who benefited from the fall of the Crimson family. Many who hold power now that once belonged to your blood. Some of them will see you as a threat to be eliminated. Others will see you as a tool to be used. And a precious few might see you as exactly what you are, the lost heir to a stolen throne. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nessa answered it, speaking in low tones with whoever stood outside, then returned. The High Commander comes. He wants to speak with you alone. Kira's pulse quickened. She had not spoken to Thorn since the square, since her transformation. Nessa left, and moments later Thorn entered. He seemed even larger in the small tower room, his presence overwhelming. He studied her in silence, his violet eyes moving over her clean face, her styled hair. The dress that made her look less like a healer and more like something else entirely. Do you remember me? He asked finally. The question surprised her. High Commander, from before? From the keep. Did you ever see me during your years of service? From a distance, High Commander, Kira said carefully. I kept to the healing ward, the herb gardens. I was not permitted in the halls when the court was present. But I saw you, Thorn said quietly. His voice was almost reflective. 4 months ago, you were carrying bandages through the east corridor, your head down, trying to be invisible. I remember thinking your eyes were unusual, striking. I asked one of the healers who you were, and they told me you were nobody, just a low-caste healer woman. He stepped closer. That bothered me. The dismissal. Something about it felt wrong. Kira did not know what to say. The idea that the High Commander had noticed her, had asked about her, seemed impossible. You told me you did not kill Garrett, Thorn continued. I believe you. A healer, even a bloodborne healer, would not have the training or strength to overcome a warrior of his caliber. Which means someone else did. Someone who had reason to want him dead, and you blamed for it. The investigation, Kira began, has revealed interesting things. Thorne's expression darkened. Garrett's body disappeared from the mortuary before the healers could complete their examination. The witnesses who claimed to see you fleeing the scene have vanished from the territory entirely. Someone orchestrated this very carefully. Someone with resources and influence. But why? Kira demanded. Why would anyone target me? I am nobody. I was nobody until yesterday. I knew nothing of my heritage. That is what I intend to discover, Thorne said. He moved to the window, staring out at the square below where the seat still bore its crimson cracks. But while I investigate, you are in danger. Someone wants you dead, and they came very close to achieving that goal. If I had not demanded you transform, if the seat had not responded, you would have died at dawn and no one would have questioned it. What happens now? Kira asked. Now the court is in chaos, Thorne said bluntly. Half believe you are a sign from the gods, the rightful ruler returned. The other half believe you are an impostor using dark magic to deceive us. My second-in-command, Castor, is already calling for your immediate execution, claiming you are a threat to the stability of the realm. He turned back to face her. And he is not entirely wrong. Your existence does threaten stability. It raises questions about the legitimacy of the current ruling structure, about what really happened 23 years ago. I do not want a throne, Kira said desperately. I do not want power or politics. I just want Marcus safe. I want to clear my name. What you want and what you are may be two different things. Thorne's gaze was intense, searching. But for now, you will remain here under guard, for your protection as much as anything else. Nessa will teach you what you need to know about your heritage, and I will find out who murdered Garrett and why they wanted you to take the blame. He moved toward the door, then paused. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, almost uncertain. My wolf has been restless since your transformation, agitated in a way I have never experienced. It wants to be near you, to protect you. I do not understand it. Kira's breath caught. She had heard of such things, the way wolves sometimes responded to certain individuals, but she did not understand it either. Stay in this room, Thorne commanded, his voice returning to its usual authority. Do not leave for any reason. If anyone tries to enter besides Nessa or myself, scream. The guards have orders to respond immediately. He left, the door closing firmly behind him. Kira sank onto the bed, her mind spinning with everything she had learned. She was not who she thought she was. Her entire life had been a lie, a cover story to hide royal blood. And now that truth was exposed, she had become a target. But beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, was something else, a question she could not quite articulate. If she was bloodborne, if her wolf was truly that powerful, what else had been suppressed all these years? What else might she be capable of? The moon was rising outside her window, full and bright. Kira stared at it and felt something stir within her. That same vast power she had touched during her transformation. It was still there, waiting, just beneath her skin. And somehow she knew her life would never be simple again. Chapter 3. The attack came on the fourth night. Kira woke to the sound of shattering glass. She rolled from the bed by instinct, hitting the floor hard as something whistled through the air where her head had been moments before. A crossbow bolt embedded itself in the wooden headboard with a solid thunk. She opened her mouth to scream, but hands clamped over her face, dragging her backward. Not one attacker. Multiple. They had come through the window, scaled the tower wall in darkness, and now they were going to finish what they had started when they killed Garrett. Kira fought. She clawed and kicked and tried to shift, tried to call on that crimson wolf that had saved her in the square, but her body would not obey. The transformation would not come, locked away by panic and inexperience. She was just a woman again, small and weak, facing trained killers in the dark. Then the door exploded inward. Thorne came through in his wolf form, massive and black as midnight, his violet eyes blazing with fury. He hit the nearest attacker with enough force to shatter bones, his jaws closing around the man's throat before the assassin could even scream. Blood sprayed across the floor. The other assassins turned to face this new threat, but they were too slow. Thorne was already moving, a blur of black fur and savage efficiency. He moved through them with the skill of someone who had been fighting since childhood, who knew exactly where to strike to kill quickly and without mercy. Kira scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the wall, watching the carnage unfold. 5 attackers, all mid-caste, she realized, seeing their builds, their coordinated movements. These were not random criminals. These were trained soldiers, sent with a specific purpose. The last one tried to run. Thorn caught him before he reached the shattered window, dragging him down by the leg. The man's scream cut off abruptly as massive jaws closed around his spine. Then it was over. 5 bodies cooling on the floor. Thorn shifted back to human form in one fluid motion, standing naked and blood-spattered in the moonlight streaming through the broken window. He looked at Kira, his chest heaving, his eyes still holding that feral edge. "Are you hurt?" Kira shook her head. She could not find words. The violence had been so sudden, so absolute. Guards poured into the room, weapons drawn, but they stopped short at the scene before them. Thorn barked orders, sending some to secure the tower, others to search for any additional threats. He grabbed a cloak from one of the guards and wrapped it around himself, then crossed to Kira and pulled her to her feet. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she managed. "Then come. You cannot stay here. It is not secure." He led her through corridors she barely registered, her mind still reeling. The guards formed a protective circle around them, weapons drawn, checking every shadow. They climbed stairs and traversed hallways until finally Thorn pushed open a heavy door and guided her inside. His private chambers. Kira recognized them from descriptions she had heard from other healers, though she had never seen them herself. The space was vast, dominated by a massive bed and a fireplace large enough to roast a boar. Weapons lined one wall, maps covered another. "You will stay here," Thorn said, releasing her finally. "There is an adjoining room through that door. You will sleep there. I will sleep here. Anyone who wants to reach you will have to go through me first." "High Commander, I cannot," Kira protested weakly. "The scandal. The court will say." "The court can say whatever they wish," Thorn cut her off. "You nearly died tonight because I underestimated the threat against you. That will not happen again." He moved to a cabinet and poured something amber into 2 glasses, pressing one into her shaking hands. "Drink. It will help with the shock." Kira drank. The liquid burned down her throat, harsh and bitter, but it did help. The shaking eased slightly, and her mind began to clear. "They were mid-caste," she said. "Trained ones. I saw the way they moved." "Yes." Thorn's expression was grim. "And they bore marks here." He traced a pattern on his own forearm. A raven coiled around a blade. The symbol of a group that should no longer exist. The Purists. The name meant nothing to Kira. Thorn saw her confusion and elaborated. 23 years ago, when your family was executed, there was a faction among the high caste and mid-caste who believed the crimson bloodline was too powerful, that their gifts gave them unfair advantage over other shifters. They called themselves Purists, and they advocated for the complete elimination of your family. Every member, every child, every trace of crimson blood wiped from existence. "But I thought the executions were for treason," Kira said. "The official story, yes," Thorn's jaw tightened. "But my father once told me there was more to it. He died before he could explain, but he hinted that the evidence against the Crimson family might have been manufactured, that the Purists wanted them gone not because of any crime, but simply because of what they were." Kira's hands tightened around her glass. "And now the Purists have found me. If they still exist, yes. Which means the conspiracy that killed your family may never have ended." It simply went underground, waiting. A knock at the door interrupted them. A guard entered, followed by a tall man with sandy hair and a thick beard. He wore the colors of the keep's elite guard, and his bearing suggested authority. "High Commander, the tower has been secured. We found the bodies of 3 guards on the stairwell below the healer's room. They were killed silently, professionally. The assassins gained access through bribery or blackmail of someone with knowledge of guard rotations." The sandy-haired man's gaze shifted to Kira, assessing. This was not a random attack. Someone inside the keep provided information. "Thank you, Rowan," Thorn said. "Continue the investigation. I want to know everyone who had access to the tower schedules for the past week. And bring me the body of one of the assassins. I want to examine those marks myself." Rowan bowed and departed. Thorn turned back to Kira. "Rowan is my commander of the guard. One of the few people in this keep I trust completely. He will find out who enabled this attack." He paused. "You tried to shift during the fight. Why did you fail?" Shame heated Kira's cheeks. "I do not know how. The transformation in the square. It just happened. I cannot control it." "Then you need to learn quickly," Thorn said. He moved to the door of the adjoining chamber, opening it to reveal a smaller but still well-appointed bedroom. Tomorrow, Nessa will begin teaching you. Not just about your heritage, but about your power. How to call your wolf at will. How to use the gifts that come with crimson blood. What gifts? Kira asked. Thorn's smile was slight, almost sad. That is for Nessa to explain. She remembers your family better than anyone living. She knows what you should be capable of. He gestured toward the bedroom. Try to sleep. You are safe here. I give you my word. Kira wanted to argue, to protest that she could not possibly sleep after what had just happened. But exhaustion was pulling at her, adrenaline fading into bone-deep weariness. She went into the adjoining room and found it comfortable, warm, with a bed far softer than anything she had ever slept on before. She lay down, still wearing her dress, unable to muster the energy to change. Through the open door, she could see Thorn standing by his window, staring out at the night. Even from here, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the windowsill. His wolf wanted to protect her. That was what he had said. But Kira was beginning to wonder if it was more than just wolf instinct. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. The way his entire demeanor changed when she was in danger. It felt like something deeper, something neither of them understood yet. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Tried not to think about the bodies on her tower floor, about the people who wanted her dead, about the impossible situation she found herself in. But sleep would not come easily. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The next morning, Nessa arrived before dawn. She looked unsurprised to find Kira in the High Commander's chambers, merely nodding in approval. Good. You are harder to kill here. Come, we begin your education today, and there is much ground to cover. They worked in one of the keep's interior training rooms, a space designed for teaching young shifters to control their transformations. Nessa started with the basics, explaining what Kira should have learned as a child. Common low caste have weak wolves because their bloodlines have been diluted over generations of random pairings, Nessa lectured. No concentration of power, no genetic focus. But the Crimson family was different. They bred for power, for purity of gift. Every generation stronger than the last. Your wolf is not weak, she never was. She was simply buried, suppressed by lack of use and understanding. How do I reach her? Kira asked. By acknowledging her. By accepting what you are. Nessa circled her slowly. You have spent 24 years trying to be small, to be invisible. That ends now. Close your eyes. Feel for the wolf inside you. Not with fear, not with desperation, with recognition. She is not a separate thing. She is you. Kira closed her eyes and reached inward. At first, there was nothing, just the familiar blankness she had always encountered when she tried to shift. But then, faintly, she felt it, that vast presence she had touched in the square. It was there waiting patient. I feel her, Kira whispered. Good. Now understand this. The transformation hurts common shifters because their bodies are fighting between two inadequate forms. But your body was made for this. The pain you felt before was your wolf trying to emerge through layers of suppression. Let her surface naturally, and it will be different. Kira focused on that presence, that power. She did not demand it. She did not force it. She simply acknowledged it, accepted it, welcomed it. The transformation flowed through her easily this time, almost gentle. Her bones shifted without breaking. Her muscles expanded without tearing. When she opened her eyes, she was crimson again, large and powerful, looking up at Nessa through wolf vision. Perfect, Nessa said, satisfaction in her voice. Now shift back with the same intention. Do not fight it. Flow. Shifting back was harder, required more concentration, but Kira managed it. She stood naked in the training room, breathing hard but without pain. I did it, she said, wonder in her voice. You will practice this daily until it becomes as natural as breathing, Nessa said. But that is only the beginning. The Crimson bloodline had other gifts, stronger gifts. The ability to command other shifters through will alone, forcing even high caste to submit. The power to see memories through blood. Enhanced healing. Connection to the ancient magics that govern our kind. Can I learn those too? Perhaps with time and training. Your grandmother could make an entire army kneel with a single word. Your grandfather could read the history of any object by touching it. The gifts manifest differently in each bloodborne, but they are always there, waiting to be unlocked. They train through the morning. Nessa pushing Kira to transform again, and again until it became second nature. By midday, Kira could shift and reverse the shift in under a minute, smooth and controlled. Enough for today, Nessa said finally. You have made remarkable progress. But there is something else you must do. Something that has been delayed too long. What? You must see your brother. Kira's heart leaped. Marcus, I can see him? The High Commander has permitted it. Under heavy guard, of course. He is in a cell in the East Wing. Not the dungeons, but not comfortable either. He has been frightened, confused, kept apart from you without explanation. He deserves to know you are alive. They went together, accompanied by 6 guards. The cell was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a barred window. Marcus sat on that bed, his brown hair tangled, his face pale with fear. When he saw Kira, he jumped up with a cry of relief. Kira, they would not tell me anything. Would not say if you were alive or dead. What is happening? Why are we still here? The guard allowed Kira to enter the cell. She wrapped her arms around Marcus, holding her brother tightly, breathing in his familiar scent. Marcus was thinner, trembling, clearly terrified. I am so sorry, Kira whispered. I am so sorry you were dragged into this. They say Garrett is dead, that you killed him. But that cannot be true. Tell me it is not true. I did not kill him, Kira said firmly. But proving that has become complicated. She pulled back, looking into Marcus's frightened eyes. How much should she explain? How much could a 15-year-old boy understand about royal bloodlines and ancient conspiracies? Something happened during my trial, Kira began carefully. Something that changed everything. I discovered that I am not who we thought I was. The family that raised us, they bought me when I was a small child. My real family was different, important, and now people are trying to kill me because of it. Marcus's eyes widened. What do you mean? What family? The Crimson family. Nessa interjected quietly from the doorway. Your sister is royal-born, child. Lost royalty, but royalty nonetheless. And that makes her very dangerous to very powerful people. Marcus looked between them, confusion warring with disbelief. That is impossible. You are my sister. You have always been my sister. We shared a home, a life. How can you suddenly be royalty? Blood does not change what we are to each other, Kira said, gripping Marcus's hands. You are still my brother. You always will be. But right now, I need to tell you something important. Something that might help us both. What? On the night Garrett died, did you see anything? Hear anything? I was at the keep working late. You were home alone. When I arrived, he was already dying. But someone killed him. Someone who wanted me to be blamed. Marcus's face scrunched with concentration. I was asleep at first, but then something woke me. Voices outside. I got up and looked through the window, and I saw a man leaving, just walking away from our cottage into the forest. Did you see his face? No, it was too dark. But I saw his hand. He wore a ring. I remember because it caught the moonlight. Silver, I think, with a symbol on it. A raven coiled around something. It looked like it was moving in the light, and it frightened me. Kira turned to look at Nessa, and the old woman's expression had gone very still. A raven, Nessa said quietly. The same symbol the assassins bore. That ring was the symbol of House Garrett, a family crest passed from father to son. If Marcus saw someone wearing that ring after Garrett's supposed death, it means one of two things. Either the killer took it from Garrett's body, or Garrett was alive when he left the cottage, Kira finished. He staged his own death and tried to frame me for it. But why would Garrett do such a thing? Nessa murmured. What did he gain by faking his murder and blaming an insignificant healer? Unless he had somehow known what she was. Unless the entire thing had been designed to force her to reveal herself, to transform publicly so that her true nature would be exposed and she could be eliminated under the guise of lawful execution. I need to tell Thorne, Kira said. This changes everything. They left Marcus with promises to return soon, to keep him safe. Kira's mind raced as they walked back through the keep corridors. If Garrett had known about her heritage, who had told him? Who else knew? And if he had gone to such elaborate lengths to expose and kill her, was he working alone or as part of a larger conspiracy? When they reached Thorne's chambers, they found him in conference with Rowan. Both men looked up as she entered, and she saw the grim expressions on their faces. We have a problem, Thorne said without preamble. Castor has been gathering support among the high caste. He is calling for an emergency council session, demanding your immediate execution on grounds of sorcery and deception. He claims you are using dark magic to deceive the seat, that your transformation was an illusion designed to create chaos. Can he do that? Kira asked. He can try, Rowan said. And he has enough support that the High Commander cannot simply dismiss the request. The council will convene in 4 days. You will be required to defend yourself, to prove your heritage is real. But I have information, Kira protested. About Garrett, about what really happened that night. Thorn listened intently as she explained what Marcus had seen. When she finished, his expression had darkened to something dangerous. If Garrett faked his death, if he is still alive and orchestrating this, then we are dealing with something far more complex than a simple murder. He was my father's most trusted warrior. He looked at Rowan. Send out trackers quietly. Search the forests east of the keep. If Garrett is alive, he cannot have gone far. There is more, Nessa added. The ring Marcus described, the raven symbol. It matches the marks the assassins bore, which suggests Garrett may be connected to the purists, may even be leading them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Garrett was alive, if he was working with the purists, if he had somehow discovered Kira's true heritage and engineered her exposure to create justification for her execution, then this conspiracy went far deeper than anyone had realized. We have 4 days, Thorn said finally. 4 days to find evidence, to prepare your defense, to convince the council that you are what you appear to be, and 4 days to figure out what Garrett is planning and why he wants you dead badly enough to orchestrate this elaborate scheme. He crossed to where Kira stood and looked down at her, his violet eyes intense. I meant what I said. You are under my protection now. Whatever comes, whatever the council decides, I will not let them harm you. On my life, I swear it. Kira should have felt comforted by those words. Instead, she felt the weight of them, the promise they represented. Thorn was binding himself to her fate, risking his position and his life for a woman he barely knew. But as she looked up at him, at the fierce determination in his eyes, she realized something that should have terrified her. She did not want him to fight her battles alone. She wanted to stand beside him. And that desire had nothing to do with duty or gratitude. Something was building between them, something neither of them had named yet. But it was there, undeniable and growing stronger with each passing day. Her wolf recognized as wolf, called to it in ways she did not understand. And in 4 days, everything would come to a head. The council would demand answers. Garrett would make his move, and Kira would have to decide who she was going to be. The frightened healer who hid from her nature, or the crimson heir who faced it head-on. The choice, she realized, had already been made. From the moment the seat cracked and recognized her blood, there was no going back. Chapter 4. Garrett walked into the council chamber alive. Kira was standing beside Thorn when it happened, going over testimony for the upcoming council session. When the doors opened and the impossible occurred, the man whose death had started everything, whose blood had stained her hands and condemned her to the cells, strode into the hall with perfect confidence. He looked exactly as she remembered. Iron-gray hair, cold brown eyes, the scar cutting across his weathered face. He wore the robes of his station as warrior and advisor, and behind him came a contingent of guards and several high-ranking officials. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, as he bowed to the High Commander. High Commander, forgive my absence these past days. I have been gathering evidence of a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of our territory. Thorn had gone very still beside Kira. She could feel the tension radiating from him, barely controlled fury held in check by military discipline. Explain yourself, Garrett. You were declared dead. Your body was found. How do you stand before me now? A deception, High Commander, but not of my making. Garrett's voice carried through the hall, measured and reasonable. I was attacked that night near the cottage of this woman. He gestured toward Kira without looking at her. I managed to wound my attacker and escape into the forest to tend my injuries. When I returned the next morning, I discovered I had been declared murdered and this healer arrested for my death. I realized then that I had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than a simple assault. You stayed hidden for days while an innocent woman faced execution. Thorn's voice was deadly quiet. I used those days to investigate, High Commander, to follow the threads of conspiracy back to their source. Garrett finally turned to look at Kira, and his eyes held nothing but cold calculation. This woman is not what she appears. She is part of a plot to destabilize the territory, to resurrect the dead Crimson Line, and use it as a weapon against the established order. That is a lie, Kira said, her voice stronger than she felt. You know it is a lie. Do I? Garrett pulled documents from his robes, spreading them on a nearby table. I have here correspondence between this woman and agents of the Eastern clans. Plans to reveal her heritage at a moment of maximum chaos. Instructions on how to deceive the seat, to make it appear to respond to her presence through dark magic and trickery. Those documents are false, Thorne said flatly. Kira cannot read or write beyond her own name. She was a healer. She had no contact with foreign agents. Or so she would have you believe, High Commander. But consider the convenience of her story. A low-caste nobody suddenly revealed to be lost royalty at the exact moment she faces execution for murder. The seat cracks at her transformation. Something that has not occurred in a generation. Is that not suspicious? Is that not exactly the kind of theatrical display one would engineer to create legitimacy? Murmurs rose through the assembled officials. Kira could see doubt spreading across faces that had been neutral before. Garrett was skilled at this, she realized. He was taking the truth and twisting it, making the miraculous seem sinister. The seat does not lie, Nessa said, stepping forward from where she had been observing. I am old, Garrett. Old enough to remember when the Crimson family ruled. I saw the seat respond to them then, and I saw it respond to this girl. That is not magic. That is blood recognition built into the sacred obsidian by the ancients themselves. Or you are part of the conspiracy, Garrett said smoothly. You were, after all, healer to the Crimson family before their execution. Perhaps you have spent 23 years waiting for an opportunity to resurrect their line, to reclaim power you lost when they fell. You go too far, Thorne said, his voice sharp with warning. Nessa has served this keep faithfully for 50 years. Her loyalty is beyond question. Is it, High Commander? Or have we all been deceived? Garrett's expression was sorrowful, regretful. I take no pleasure in this revelation. But the evidence is clear. This woman is an impostor, using dark arts to create the illusion of royal heritage. She should be executed, not for my murder, which did not occur, but for the far greater crime of attempting to overthrow the rightful order. Castor chose that moment to speak up from his position among the officials. I must agree with Garrett. The appearance of a supposed Crimson heir at this particular moment is too convenient. We should investigate thoroughly before accepting her claims. The council will convene as planned, Thorne said coldly. But until then, both Kira and Garrett will remain in the keep under guard. If there is a conspiracy here, we will uncover it. But I will not condemn anyone on forged documents and convenient timing. Of course, High Commander. Garrett bowed again, and Kira saw the faintest hint of satisfaction in his expression. He had accomplished what he came to do. He had planted doubt, created division, made her revelation seem like a plot rather than destiny. The council dispersed slowly, officials talking in hushed groups, casting glances toward Kira that ranged from suspicious to hostile. Thorne dismissed the remaining officials with a gesture, leaving only himself, Kira, Rowan, and Nessa in the chamber. He is lying, Kira said once they were alone. Everything he said was a lie. I have never communicated with the Eastern clans. I have never plotted against anyone. Until a week ago, I did not even know I was bloodborne. I know, Thorne said. But he has support, too much support. Half the officials in this court benefit from the current power structure. The thought of the Crimson line returning threatens their positions, their lands, their influence. They want to believe Garrett's story because it gives them justification to eliminate you. Then what do we do? Kira asked. Nessa had been silent, her expression distant and thoughtful. Now she spoke, her voice heavy with old memory. There is a way to prove the truth, but it is dangerous, perhaps deadly. The Crimson family had a gift beyond their wolves, beyond their command. They could see truth through blood. If Kira touches blood spilled in violence, blood that remembers the moment of its spilling, she can see what happened. She can witness the memories held within it. The blood from the night of the massacre, Thorne said slowly. When the Crimson family was executed, it was preserved as evidence, sealed in the keep's vault. If Kira could touch it, see what truly happened that night, Nessa finished, she could see who ordered it. She could see if the charges against her family were real or manufactured. And the council would be forced to accept that truth, because blood memories cannot lie. But you said it was dangerous, Kira said. The gift is powerful, but it requires strength of will and strength of blood. If your Crimson heritage is weak, if you cannot channel the power properly, it will kill you. The memories will overwhelm your mind, shatter your consciousness. You will die screaming, lost in visions of the past. The room fell silent. Kira looked at each of them in turn. Nessa, ancient and wise, watching her with something like pity. Rowan, loyal and steady, his hand resting on his sword hilt. And Thorn, his violet eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Do not do this," Thorn said quietly. "There must be another way. We can investigate Garrett's claims, prove them false through conventional means." "And how long will that take?" Kira asked. "Days. Weeks. While Castor gathers more support, while Garrett spreads more lies, while half the court becomes convinced I am an imposter. No. If there is a way to prove the truth absolutely, I must take it. Even if it kills you?" "Yes." Kira met his gaze steadily. "I will not live as a liar. I will not let Garrett win through deception. Whatever I am, whatever my blood truly holds, I need to know. The territory needs to know." Something passed between them in that moment. Some wordless communication that went deeper than language. Thorn's jaw tightened, his hands clenching at his sides. But finally he nodded. "Then we do it tonight. In the sacred chamber where the blood relics are kept. Nessa will guide you. Rowan and I will witness. And if this goes wrong, if you start to fail—" He stopped, his voice rough. "You cannot pull her back," Nessa warned. "Once the connection is made, breaking it prematurely could be as deadly as letting it continue. The only way to survive is to see the vision through to its end." "Then she will survive," Thorn said with absolute conviction. "Because I will not accept any other outcome." They prepared as the sun set. Kira bathed and dressed in simple white robes that Nessa provided. Traditional garments for sacred rituals. Her hands shook as she tied the sash, and she had to try 3 times before she succeeded. She was terrified. She would not pretend otherwise. But she was also determined. The sacred chamber was ancient, older than the keep itself, carved into the bedrock beneath the fortress. They descended through passages lit by torches, past chambers dedicated to various gods, until they reached a vault sealed with iron and holy symbols. Rowan opened it with a key he wore on a chain around his neck, revealing shelves lined with relics from the territory's history. The blood was kept in a crystal vial, dark and thick despite 23 years of preservation. Nessa handled it with reverence, carrying it to an altar in the center of the chamber. She placed it carefully on the stone surface, then turned to Kira. "Once you touch this, the visions will come. You will see what happened that night as if you were there. Do not fight it. Do not try to pull away. Let it flow through you, and when it is finished, release it. Can you do this?" "I do not know," Kira admitted. "But I will try." She approached the altar slowly, each step feeling heavy. Thorn stood to one side, his expression carved from stone, but she could see the tension in his body, the way his hands flexed as if preparing to grab her. Rowan flanked the other side, silent and watchful. Kira reached out and placed her fingertips against the crystal vial. Pain hit her like lightning. She gasped, her body going rigid as the world around her disappeared and another world, another time, rushed in to replace it. She was standing in the central square. The same square where she had transformed, but different, younger, 23 years younger. Dawn light was breaking over the keep walls, and the space was packed with people. But these people were not officials. They were prisoners. Kira saw them clearly, men, women, youths, all bearing the mark she now recognized in her reflection. Auburn hair, emerald green eyes, the unmistakable features of the crimson bloodline. They were chained, forced to their knees before the seat of judgment. And standing beside that seat was a younger version of Garrett, his hair still holding some brown among the gray, his face unlined. But it was unmistakably him. And he was not alone. A dozen high caste officials stood with him, including faces she recognized from the current court. They wore the raven symbol openly, proud of their allegiance. "By order of the Council of Commanders," the younger Garrett announced, his voice ringing across the square. "The House of Crimson is found guilty of treason, conspiracy, and attempted overthrow of the lawful government. The sentence is death for all members above the age of first transformation. The youngest children will be sold into service, their names and heritage stripped away, never to return. This is murder," a woman's voice, strong despite her chains. Kira focused on her and felt her breath stop. The woman could have been Kira's twin. The same face, the same eyes, but older, regal, defiant even in chains. Her mother. This was her mother. "You have no proof," Kira's mother continued. "The documents you present are forgeries. We have done nothing but exist." And you fear us for it. You fear our power, our legitimacy. So you invent crimes to justify genocide. The proof has been examined and accepted, Garrett said coldly. Your family has plotted with the eastern clans to divide this territory. You have accumulated weapons and trained soldiers in secret. You plan to seize power by force and enslave the other castes under Crimson rule. These are facts. These are lies, another Crimson stood, a man with broad shoulders and a warrior's build. Kira's father. And you know it, Garrett. You manufactured this evidence. You and your purists have wanted us gone since before I was born. This is not justice. This is extermination. Garrett's expression did not change. Execute them. What followed was butchery. Kira tried to close her eyes to look away, but the vision would not allow it. She was forced to watch as her family, her blood, was systematically slaughtered. She saw her mother die protecting younger siblings, saw her father cut down while trying to break his chains, saw youths beheaded, their blood soaking into the square stones. And through it all, Garrett watched with cold satisfaction. But there was more. The vision pulled her deeper, showing her what came after. Showed her Garrett meeting with the purest officials in secret chambers, dividing Crimson lands among themselves. Showed him burning documents, real documents, that proved the Crimson family's innocence. Showed him finding a small girl child, perhaps 2 years old, with distinctive green eyes, and making the decision not to kill her because of the divine law against harming children before first transformation. Showed him selling that child to a poor family on the territory's edge, never expecting her to survive to adulthood, never imagining she would one day return to threaten everything he had built. And then the vision jumped forward, years forward, to a conversation between Garrett and an older man. Kira recognized him from paintings in the keep. Thorne's father, the previous high commander. The old commander confronted Garrett with evidence of the conspiracy, had somehow discovered proof of what had truly happened 23 years ago. Garrett's face went pale, then hard. You cannot reveal this. The territory would tear itself apart. The territory was built on a lie, the old commander said. I will not perpetuate it. Garrett moved. A vial appeared in his hand, and he pressed it to the old commander's lips, forcing liquid down his throat. Poison. The vision showed the commander dying slowly over the next week, everyone believing it was natural illness, while Garrett watched and ensured no healer got close enough to discover the truth. The vision released her suddenly, violently. Kira found herself on the floor of the chamber, Thorne holding her against his chest, his face pale and stricken. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but she was alive. The visions had not killed her. She was strong enough to survive them. I saw it, she gasped. I saw everything. Garrett killed them. All of them. And he murdered your father, Thorne. He poisoned him to keep the truth hidden. Thorne's arms tightened around her. She felt wetness on his face and realized he was crying too silently, his body shaking with barely contained rage and grief. The visions were shared, Nessa said softly. We all saw through the blood. We all witnessed what truly happened. Rowan stood frozen, his expression horrified. My oath. I swore an oath to serve the territory, to protect our people. That man murdered his commander. He destroyed an entire family. He has been advising the High Commander for 23 years while hiding these crimes. He will answer for them, Thorne said, his voice raw. Before the gods and the council, he will answer for everything. He looked down at Kira, his violet eyes bright with unshed tears and something deeper. You survived. I did not think you would, but you did. Kira reached up and touched his face, unable to stop herself. You are crying. I just watched my father be murdered, Thorne said quietly. I just learned that the man I trusted, the man who helped train me after my father died, is the one who killed him. Yes, I am crying. Something shifted between them in that moment. Some final wall crumbling. Kira felt it snap into place, a connection that went soul deep. Her wolf recognized his wolf, called to it, and his wolf answered with a hunger that both of them had been denying. This is the mate bond, Nessa said, her voice gentle. It has been forming since you first met, but now it awakens fully. You are mates, chosen by fate and blood. We cannot, Thorne said. But his arms did not release her. The political complications. If I claim her now, the court will say I am doing it to consolidate power, to combine the bloodlines. The court can think what it wishes, Kira said. She felt stronger now, the mate bond feeding her strength, giving her courage. We have proof of Garrett's crimes. We have witnesses who saw the blood memories. The truth will come out. And when it does, Rowan added, his voice grim, there will be war. The officials who supported Garrett, who benefited from the fall of the Crimson family, they will not accept this revelation peacefully. They have too much to lose. Thorne stood, pulling Kira up with him. Then let there be war. I will not protect murderers and traitors regardless of their rank. Garrett will face justice, and Kira's heritage will be acknowledged. Mate bond or not. They left the sacred chamber together, the four of them united in purpose now. The blood had spoken. The truth was known. Tomorrow they would present it to the council, and Garrett's carefully constructed lies would crumble to dust. Chapter 5. Kira woke 4 days later in the healing ward, her body weak but recovering. The blood vision had taken more from her than anyone anticipated. She had slept through fever dreams and trembling fits while Nessa worked to stabilize her, feeding her potions and keeping watch over her recovery. The mate bond saved you, Nessa explained when Kira finally opened her eyes. When your consciousness began to fracture under the weight of the visions, Thorne completed a partial bonding, anchoring your soul to his, giving you something to hold on to in the darkness. Without it, you would have been lost. How partial? Kira asked, sitting up carefully. Enough to tie your lives together, but not enough to complete the full bond. You can feel his emotions now, as he can feel yours. The connection will grow stronger over time unless you formalize it or sever it completely. Nessa handed her a cup of bitter tea. Drink. You need to regain your strength. The council convenes today. Today? Kira's heart jumped. But I have been unconscious for 4 days. Yes. Thorne delayed the council as long as he could, but Castor and his supporters have been pressuring him. They want answers. They want resolution. And Garrett has been busy spreading his version of events, claiming your collapse proves you used dark magic that overwhelmed you. Kira dressed quickly in clothes that had been laid out for her. Not healer garb, but fine fabric in pale crimson, clearly meant to emphasize her heritage. Her hands shook as she tied the laces, but she forced them steady. Today, everything would be decided. Rowan arrived to escort her to the council chamber. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his hand never leaving his sword hilt. The keep is tense, he warned as they walked. Garrett's supporters have been gathering. They wear his raven symbol openly now, no longer hiding their allegiance. We counted at least 50 warriors loyal to him within these walls. And how many are loyal to Thorne? Perhaps 40 we can count on absolutely. Another 30 who might support the High Commander if pressed. The rest are neutral or too frightened to take a side. Rowan's jaw tightened. We are outnumbered in our own home. They reached the council chamber to find it already packed. Every high caste and mid-caste official of rank had been summoned, and the crowd was divided clearly. On one side stood those wearing Thorne's black and silver colors. On the other, those bearing the raven of the purists. The tension was thick, volatile, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Thorne sat in his seat before the obsidian seat of judgment, but the sacred stone behind him was different now. The cracks had spread, crimson light pulsing through them in a steady rhythm. It looked less like damage and more like veins of precious metal, as if the seat was transforming into something new. Garrett stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his supporters. He looked calm, confident, certain of his position. When Kira entered, his eyes flicked to her briefly, and she saw something dangerous there. Recognition. He knew she had survived the blood vision, knew what she had seen. The council is convened, Thorne announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. We are here to address accusations made by Garrett regarding Kira's heritage, and to examine evidence regarding the massacre of the Crimson family 23 years past. With respect, High Commander, Castor interrupted, stepping forward. We should also address the allegation that you have been compromised by this woman, that she has used her supposed gifts to manipulate you into protecting her. I have been manipulated by no one, Thorne said coldly. But if the council wishes to question my judgment, let us present all evidence and see where the truth lies. Garrett cleared his throat. High Commander, I have brought additional documentation showing. We have seen your documentation. Thorne cut him off. Forgeries designed to frame an innocent woman. But we have evidence of our own. Evidence that cannot be falsified or disputed. Kira has accessed the blood memories of her family's execution. She witnessed what truly happened that night. And through the sacred ritual, we all saw it with her. Silence fell. Then chaos erupted. Impossible. Castor shouted. Blood visions are legend. Fairy tales told to children. They are real, Nessa said, her voice carrying despite her age. I have seen them performed 3 times in my lifetime. The crimson blood holds many gifts, and this is among the most sacred. What we witnessed in that chamber was truth, unfiltered and undeniable. Then share this truth, one of the neutral officials demanded. If you have such evidence, present it to the council. Very well. Thorn stood, and his presence filled the room. 23 years ago, the Crimson family was executed for treason based on forged evidence. The conspiracy was led by Garrett, who organized the purists and manufactured documents to justify genocide. He wanted the Crimson bloodline eliminated because they represented a threat to the power structure he wished to establish. After the executions, he and his co-conspirators divided Crimson lands among themselves and rewrote history to hide their crimes. That is a lie, Garrett's calm facade cracked. You have no proof of these accusations. I have the testimony of 4 witnesses who experienced the blood vision. Myself, Nessa, Commander Rowan, and Kira. We all saw what happened. We watched you lead the executions. Watched you burn the evidence that would have exonerated them. Thorn's voice dropped to something deadly. And we saw something else, Garrett. Something even more damning. We saw you murder my father. We saw you poison him to keep him from revealing the truth about the Crimson massacre. You have been a traitor to this command for 23 years, and your crimes end today. The room exploded into shouts. Garrett's supporters surged forward, hands going to weapons. Thorn's loyal guards formed a protective barrier around their commander. Kira found herself pulled behind Rowan as the guard commander drew his sword. You think your vision proves anything? Garrett shouted over the chaos. You and your pet Crimson have concocted a story to justify your illegal bonding. You want to combine the bloodlines to seize absolute power, and you are willing to destroy anyone who stands in your way. This is not about power, Thorn said. This is about justice. You murdered my father. You slaughtered an entire family. You will answer for these crimes. And who will make me? Garrett's smile was vicious. Your handful of loyal guards? Look around you, boy. Half this court stands with me. The officials see the threat she represents. They will not allow the Crimson line to return. Then they choose treason, Thorn said flatly. Anyone who stands with a murderer and commander-killer stands against this territory. The moment hung suspended, balanced on a knife's edge. Then Castor drew his sword. I stand with truth, he announced, with preservation of the proper order. The Crimson bloodline was eliminated for good reason, and I will not see it resurrected by a lovesick commander and his healer whore. The insult snapped something in Thorn. Kira felt it through the partial bond. A surge of rage so intense it nearly drove her to her knees. But before Thorn could move, before he could shift and tear Castor apart, Kira stepped forward. She had been practicing with Nessa, learning to call her transformation at will. She reached for her wolf now, and it came easily, flowing through her in a wave of crimson light. When she stood on 4 legs, massive and gleaming, every eye in the room fixed on her. Enough talking, she said, and her wolf's voice carried words clearly, another gift of the Crimson blood. If you want war, Garrett, then let us have war. But it ends now. In this room. Today. Garrett's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in calculation. He transformed as well, his gray wolf large and battle-scarred, a warrior's body honed by decades of combat. Around him, his supporters shifted, filling the hall with growls and the smell of aggression. Thorn transformed in a blur of motion, his black wolf placing itself between Kira and Garrett. Rowan and the loyal guards followed suit, creating a defensive line. The council chamber, seat of civilized governance, became a battlefield. The fighting started with Castor. He lunged at Thorn from the side, trying to catch the High Commander while he was focused on Garrett. But Kira was faster. She intercepted him, her larger wolf slamming into his golden-furred form with crushing force. They hit the ground in a tangle of claws and teeth. Castor was trained, experienced, vicious. But Kira had rage on her side. Fury for her murdered family, for her stolen childhood, for Marcus's terror and her own near execution. She fought with everything she had, and the crimson blood sang in her veins, lending her strength she did not know she possessed. Around them, the council chamber descended into chaos. Garrett's forces outnumbered Thorn's, but the loyal guards were better trained, more disciplined. Blood stained ancient stones as wolf fought wolf in the confined space. Kira felt Thorn's presence through the bond, felt his determination to reach Garrett, to end this personally. But too many enemies stood between them, and he was being dragged into multiple fights at once. She could feel his frustration, his fear for her safety, warring with his need to protect his position. She finished Castor with a vicious strike to his throat, leaving him choking on his own blood. Then she fought her way toward Thorn, using her size and strength to bulldoze through smaller wolves. The crimson gifts were manifesting instinctively now, her presence radiating authority that made weaker shifters hesitate, stumble, lose their nerve. She reached Thorn's side as he was surrounded by 6 of Garrett's mid-caste warriors. Together, they fought as a unit, their movements synchronized by the mate bond, each anticipating the other's actions. It was beautiful and terrible, a dance of death that left bodies in their wake. But there were too many. For every enemy they killed, 2 more took their place. Kira felt exhaustion setting in, felt wounds accumulating despite her attempts to avoid them. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's growing desperation. Then Garrett made his move. He had been hanging back, letting others do the fighting while he looked for an opening. Now he saw it. While Thorn was focused on the warriors surrounding him, Garrett lunged, not at the High Commander, but at Kira. From the side, his weight and momentum carrying them both across the room. His jaws clamped down on her shoulder, and Kira screamed, the pain white-hot and overwhelming. She tried to throw him off, but he was too heavy, too strong. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's terror spike into something primal. He abandoned the fight he was in and charged toward them. But Garrett's supporters blocked his path deliberately. She was alone. Garrett released her shoulder to go for her throat, the killing blow. Kira twisted desperately, taking the strike on her forehead instead. Bones cracked. Blood poured. She was going to die here, killed by the same man who had murdered her family. Then something inside her broke open. It was not the transformation. It was not physical strength. It was the other gift, the one Nessa had mentioned but never explained fully. The Crimson Command, the ability to force other shifters into submission through will alone. Kira did not know how to use it consciously. She only knew she was dying, and she refused to die without fighting back with everything she had. The command burst from her in a wave of invisible force. Every mid-caste in the room dropped instantly, their bodies going limp, unable to resist. Even some of the weaker high-caste faltered, struggling against the compulsion to submit. Only Garrett remained standing, his strong warrior lineage giving him resistance. But he was weakened, slowed, his body fighting itself as will battled instinct. Thorn reached them in that moment of hesitation. His jaws closed around Garrett's neck, and he wrenched the traitor away from Kira with brutal force. Garrett hit the ground hard, scrambling to regain his footing. "Flee," Thorn commanded, his wolf voice resonating with authority. "Take your conspirators and flee east. You have one chance to leave this territory with your lives. Refuse, and I will have every single one of you executed for treason." Garrett stared at him, bleeding from a dozen wounds, his supporters scattered and broken around him. The fight had turned decisively against him. His grand plan to eliminate Kira and consolidate his power had failed. "This is not over," Garrett growled. "You think you have won, but you have only delayed the inevitable. The purists will not accept her. They will not accept the Crimson Line's return. We will gather our forces and return. Then you will die," Thorn said simply. "I will hunt you to the ends of the earth if necessary. But for now, you have 1 hour to leave this keep. After that, anyone bearing the raven symbol will be considered an enemy of this territory." Garrett transformed back to human form, naked and bloodied, his eyes fixed on Kira. "This is your fault. All of this death, this chaos. You should have stayed hidden. Should have died in that cell. But you could not help yourself, could you? Had to reveal what you were. Had to reclaim a throne that was never yours." "The seat recognized her," Thorn said. "The gods recognized her. Who are you to deny what the sacred stone itself has acknowledged?" Garrett spat blood. Then he gathered those of his supporters who could still walk and left. They filed out of the council chamber in defeated silence, leaving behind more than 30 bodies, the cost of their conspiracy. When they were gone, Thorn shifted back to human form and went to Kira. She was still in her wolf form, unable to shift while in such pain. Her shoulder was mangled, her foreleg broken, blood pooling beneath her. "Nessa!" Thorn shouted, his hands already on Kira's fur, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Someone get Nessa now." Kira tried to speak, to tell him she was all right, but the pain was too intense. Through the bond, she felt his fear, his guilt, his desperate need to save her. And beneath that, something else. The mate bond was no longer partial. In that moment of terror, when he thought he would lose her, something had completed. They were fully bonded now, tied together for life. "Do not die," Thorn whispered, his forehead pressed against her wolf's head. "Do not you dare die on me. Not when we have just begun." Kira wanted to promise she would not. But consciousness was slipping away, dragged under by blood loss and exhaustion. The last thing she felt was his hands on her, his will flowing through the bond, trying to keep her anchored to life. And then darkness claimed her completely. Chapter 6. The journey east took 6 days, and Kira felt stronger with each one. Her wounds had healed with unnatural speed, guided by Nessa's herbs and the mate bond that tied her to Thorn. The broken foreleg was whole again, the torn shoulder merely scarred. She could shift without pain now, could feel the crimson wolf inside her as natural as breathing. Marcus had been released and sent to the western settlements under guard. Kira had held her brother one last time before they departed, promising to return, promising this would end soon. Marcus had clung to her, terrified and confused, but ultimately trusting. That trust was part of what drove her east now, toward the final confrontation. Because Garrett had taken Marcus. They had discovered it 3 hours after the battle in the council chamber. When Thorn went to transfer Marcus to safer quarters, the cell was empty. The guards dead, their throats cut silently in the chaos of the fighting. Garrett had planned for defeat, had positioned people to grab the one leverage he had left, Kira's brother. The message arrived the next morning, delivered by a terrified courier. Garrett had fled to the Frost Peaks, an ancient stronghold in the eastern mountains. He was gathering the remaining purists, calling in debts and promises from across the territories. In 2 weeks, he would have an army, and Marcus would be executed publicly unless Kira surrendered herself. Thorn had not hesitated. He assembled 60 of his best warriors, everyone who could be spared without leaving the keep defenseless. Kira insisted on joining them despite her injuries. This was her brother, her fight. She would not hide in safety while Marcus suffered. They traveled fast, shifting to wolf form during the night when they could cover ground quickly, resting in defensive formations during the day. Kira's crimson wolf was as large as Thorn's black now, and the warriors who had initially been skeptical of bringing the healer with them quickly changed their minds. She fought off 3 ambushes from purist patrols with the same ferocity she had shown in the council chamber. Rowan rode beside Thorn during the day, his sandy hair bright against the gray landscape. "We have reports from scouts," Rowan said. "Garrett has gathered close to 90 warriors at the stronghold. We are outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Unacceptable odds. We should wait for reinforcements," one of the other warriors muttered. "There is no time," Thorn said flatly. "In 2 weeks, Garrett will have twice that number. We strike now while we still have advantage of surprise." "What advantage?" the warrior pressed. "They know we are coming. They are fortified in a mountain stronghold. How exactly do we have the advantage?" Kira spoke up from where she walked in her human form. "They do not know I can use the Crimson Command. They saw me do it once, but they do not understand the full extent of it. That is our advantage." Nessa had been teaching her during their rest stops, pushing her to understand the gift that had manifested during the battle. The Crimson Command was not just submission. It was compulsion, the ability to impose her will directly onto other shifters. Midcaste were most susceptible, their minds unable to resist the force of royal blood. Weaker highcaste could be slowed, hampered. Only the strongest bloodlines had true resistance. "The command will not work on all of them," Nessa had warned. Garrett himself proved resistant. But if you can eliminate his midcaste warriors, reduce his forces significantly, it gives our people fighting chance. "How many can you affect at once?" Rowan asked now, practical as always. "I do not know," Kira admitted. "In the council chamber, I dropped maybe 30 midcasts simultaneously. But I was dying at the time, running on pure instinct. I have not tried to do it deliberately since then." "Then we make a plan around uncertainty," Thorn said. "We approach the stronghold tomorrow at dusk. Kira and I will lead a small team through the old mountain passages that Nessa says the Crimson family used centuries ago. We extract Marcus while the main force assaults the front gates as distraction." "That is suicide," someone protested. "You are the High Commander. You cannot risk yourself on a stealth mission into enemy territory." Thorn's violet eyes were hard. "I can and I will. Marcus is my mate's brother. That makes him family. I do not abandon family. The mate bond pulsed warm between them, and Kira felt Thorn's determination, his fierce protectiveness extending not just to her, but to everyone she loved. It made her throat tight, made her realize how completely he had committed to this. To her, to their shared fate. They reached the frost peaks on the 6th day. The stronghold was ancient, built into the mountainside itself. Walls of gray stone weathered by centuries of wind and snow. It had been abandoned for decades, but smoke rose from its towers now, and figures moved along the battlements. Garrett had made it operational again in just days, showing the resources he had at his disposal. They made camp in a hidden ravine a mile from the stronghold, concealed from watchers. Thorn gathered his commanders and laid out the plan in detail. The main force would attack the gates at dusk when vision was poor and defenders were changing shifts. They would make as much noise as possible, draw every available warrior to the walls. Meanwhile, Thorn, Kira, and 6 handpicked soldiers would use the hidden passages to infiltrate the fortress. Nessa had provided a map drawn from memory, showing tunnels that burrowed through the mountain itself, emerging inside the stronghold's highest tower. That is where prisoners would be kept, she had said. The most secure location, hardest to escape from. Once we have Marcus, we extract immediately, Thorn said. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Our goal is rescue, not battle. And if Garrett finds us? One of the soldiers asked. Then I kill him, Thorn said simply. But that is secondary to Marcus's safety. Understood. They all nodded. Kira felt the tension in the group, the awareness that this was dangerous, possibly fatal. But no one backed down. These were warriors who had sworn oaths to their high commander, and they would follow him into death if that was what honor required. The sun began its descent toward the horizon. They moved out in 2 groups, the main force circling toward the stronghold's front gates. The infiltration team heading for the hidden entrance Nessa had marked on her map. Finding it took longer than expected. The passage had been concealed deliberately, hidden behind rockfall and overgrowth. But eventually they uncovered a gap in the stone, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. They would have to go in human form, unable to shift in the confined space. Thorn went first, a torch in one hand and a blade in the other. Kira followed, then the 6 soldiers. The passage was tight, claustrophobic, frighteningly unstable. Loose rocks shifted under their feet. The walls seemed to press inward. One of the soldiers lost his nerve halfway through and had to be physically pushed forward by those behind him. But they made it. The passage opened into a chamber deep within the mountain, and from their ancient stairs spiraled upward. They climbed in silence, weapons drawn, every sense alert for guards or traps. They encountered the first patrol near the top, 3 mid-caste warriors, relaxed and unprepared for attack from within. Thorn killed 2 before they could raise an alarm, his movements brutal and efficient. Kira took down the 3rd with her blade. The training Nessa had insisted on paying off. They dragged the bodies into a side room and continued upward. The tower prison was exactly where Nessa said it would be. They emerged from the stairwell into a circular room with a single heavy door guarded by 5 more warriors. These were more alert. When they saw Thorn, they shouted a warning and drew weapons. The fight was quick and vicious in the confined space. Kira took down 2 of them with her blade. The soldiers handled the other 3. Then they were at the door, and Thorn was breaking the lock with brute strength. Marcus was inside, bound to a chair in the center of the small cell. His face was bruised, his clothes torn, but he was alive. His eyes went wide when he saw Kira. You came, he whispered. I knew you would come. Kira cut his bonds and pulled her brother into a fierce embrace. I will always come for you. Always. How touching, a voice said from the doorway. They spun to find Garrett standing there, flanked by 12 of his best mid-caste warriors. He looked terrible, his face haggard, his wounds from the council chamber still healing. But his eyes were sharp and full of malice. Did you really think I would not anticipate this? Garrett asked. That I would not prepare for you to attempt rescue? I have been waiting, Thorn. Waiting for you to walk into my trap. Then you die disappointed, Thorn said, moving to put himself between Garrett and the others. Because we are leaving with Marcus, and you cannot stop us. Perhaps not, Garrett agreed. But I can make you pay dearly for it. His warriors attacked. The tower room became a whirlwind of violence. Thorn shifted instantly, his black wolf tearing into the mid-caste with savage fury. The soldiers fought to protect Marcus and Kira, outnumbered but determined. Kira wanted to shift, to fight, but the space was too confined with so many bodies. She kept Marcus behind her, blade out, protecting her brother while looking for an opening to use the command. Then Garrett transformed. His gray wolf lunged not at Thorn, but at the soldiers guarding the stairwell. He killed one instantly, then bounded past the others, heading down. He was fleeing, abandoning his warriors to save himself. No, Kira shouted. She could not let him escape, could not let him gather more forces and continue this war. She shoved Marcus toward one of the surviving soldiers. Get him out through the passages. Go now. Then she shifted and charged after Garrett. The stairwell was narrow, treacherous for wolves their size. Kira crashed down the steps, her claws scrabbling for purchase, chasing the gray wolf ahead of her. She heard Thorn roar behind her, felt his fury through the bond, but he was trapped fighting the remaining warriors. He could not follow. Garrett burst out of the tower into the stronghold's main courtyard. The battle was raging at the gates, Thorn's warriors clashing with purists in the fading light. Garrett ran toward his own forces, clearly intending to rally them, to turn the tide. Kira caught him before he made it. She slammed into his side with her full weight, and they went down in a tangle of fur and teeth. Garrett was experienced, skilled, vicious. He fought with the desperation of someone who knew defeat meant death. His jaws snapped at her throat, her legs, anywhere vulnerable. But Kira had something he did not: rage. Pure, burning rage for everything he had stolen from her. Her family, her childhood, her innocence. For Marcus's terror and Thorn's pain. For 23 years of lies and hidden truth. She fought with that rage fueling her, and slowly she began to overwhelm him. She was larger, stronger. The crimson blood giving her advantages he could not match. When she finally got her jaws around his throat, she felt him freeze, felt his body go still in submission. But she saw his eyes, saw the hatred there, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. He would never stop, never surrender. As long as he lived, he would plot and scheme and try to destroy her. So she ended it. Her jaws closed with crushing force, and she felt his windpipe collapse, felt his life leave him in a final shuddering breath. When she released him, the gray wolf fell to the ground, dead. The purists saw it happen, saw their leader die at the feet of the crimson wolf, and something broke in them. The mid-caste began to falter, to flee. Even some of the high caste lost their nerve, breaking away from the fight, running for the mountains. Thorn's forces pressed the advantage, driving the remaining purists back, overwhelming them. Within minutes, it was over. The Frost Peak stronghold belonged to the High Commander again. Kira shifted back to human form, naked and covered in blood, standing over Garrett's corpse. She felt empty, hollow. She had killed the man who murdered her family, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like survival, like doing what was necessary because there had been no other choice. Then Thorn was there, shifting to human, pulling her against him. She felt his heartbeat, rapid and strong, felt his relief through the bond. He had been terrified that charging after Garrett alone meant she would die. "It is over," he said against her hair. "He is dead. It is finally over." Kira nodded, but she could not speak. Exhaustion was crashing over her, battle fatigue and emotional trauma combining. Thorn simply held her. Let her shake. Let her process everything. Rowan approached with Marcus, who had been brought out safely through the passages. Marcus was crying, reaching for Kira. The siblings held each other while Thorn gave orders to his warriors. Secure the stronghold. Tend the wounded. Round up the surviving purists for judgment. They found 53 prisoners among those who surrendered. Some were fanatics who spat curses and refused to bend. Others were frightened, claiming they had been coerced or deceived. Thorn ordered the fanatics executed immediately, but gave mercy to those who renounced their allegiance to Garrett and the purist cause. They would serve the territory as laborers, working to rebuild what they had helped destroy. It took 3 days to organize for the journey home. 3 days of rest and recovery, of tending wounds and burying dead. 15 of Thorn's 60 warriors had fallen in the battle. 15 lives spent to save one boy and eliminate a threat to the territory. On the 4th day, they began the return journey. Kira rode with Marcus for most of it, letting her brother process everything he had endured. Marcus was traumatized but resilient, already talking about returning to the healing ward to use his new status as the Queen's brother to help those who needed it. As they traveled, Kira noticed people coming out of their homes to watch them pass. Word had spread quickly. The crimson heir had returned. She had defeated the purists. The war was over. Some knelt as she passed. Others simply stared in wonder at the crimson-furred wolf walking beside the black. When the keep finally came into view after a week of travel, Kira felt something settle in her chest. Home. This place was home now, in a way her cottage never had been. She was not a healer anymore. Not a nobody. She was royalty. Mate to the High Commander. Last daughter of an ancient line. Thorn walked beside her in his wolf form, their shoulders touching, the mate bond humming warm and complete between them. They had survived battle and conspiracy, had emerged bloodied but victorious. And now they would build something new, something better. The keep gates opened to welcome them home, and Kira walked through them with her head high, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 7. The council chamber was filled with the entire court when they arrived back at the keep. But the atmosphere was different now, subdued, respectful. The officials who had remained neutral during the conflict stood with heads bowed. Those who had supported Thorn looked vindicated. And the spaces where Garrett's supporters once stood were conspicuously empty. Kira walked through those assembled ranks in human form, wearing travel-stained clothes, her hair tangled and dirty from the journey. She looked nothing like a queen should look. But when she passed, people knelt, not out of fear, but out of recognition. She had proven herself through blood and battle. There was no denying her heritage now. Nessa waited at the front of the chamber, her ancient face showing relief at their safe return. Beside her stood functionaries and priests, already preparing for what came next. Because Thorn had made his decision clear before they even left the eastern mountains. They would not wait, would not delay further. The territory needed stability, needed to see its rulers united and strong. Tomorrow, Thorn had said during the journey home, his hand finding Kira's in the darkness of their camp. We formalize everything tomorrow. Your coronation as Crimson Queen. Our official bonding before the court. No more questions. No more challenges. Now that tomorrow had become today, Kira was whisked away to private chambers where attendants bathed her, tended her remaining wounds, dressed her in robes of crimson silk that seemed to shimmer with their own light. They wove silver chains through her auburn hair and painted her eyes with traditional markings. When they finished, Kira barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like the woman from her blood visions. Her mother, her grandmother, the Crimson Queens who had ruled before her. The resemblance was undeniable, and it made her chest tight with grief for the family she would never know except through ancient memories preserved in blood. Marcus came to see her before the ceremony. Her brother's bruises were fading, and he wore a fine tunic befitting his new station as the Queen's adopted brother. They held hands in silence for a long moment. I am going back to the healing ward, Marcus said finally. After this, Thorn has granted me authority to establish training programs, but I want to use them to help people like us, the forgotten ones, the low caste who have no voice. You will be remarkable at it, Kira said, meaning every word. You have always had the kindest heart of anyone I know. And you have always been braver than you believed, Marcus replied. He touched her face gently. Mother and father would be proud. Not your blood family, but the ones who raised you. They would be proud of what you have become. Kira had to blink back tears. She had been so focused on her lost royal heritage that she had nearly forgotten the simple people who had taken in a frightened child and given her a home. They deserved to be remembered too. The ceremony began as the moon rose. The entire court assembled in the great hall, packed so tightly that people stood shoulder to shoulder. Torches blazed from every wall, and the seat of judgment itself seemed to glow, crimson light pulsing through its cracks in time with some ancient rhythm. Thorn stood before it in his ceremonial robes, the black and silver of his house, his circlet of polished steel resting on his silver hair. He looked every inch the warrior commander, powerful and commanding. When Kira entered the hall, his violet eyes fixed on her, and she felt the mate bond surge with emotion. Pride, love, possessiveness, need. Nessa conducted the ritual, her voice carrying across the silent hall. She spoke of the crimson bloodline, of their 800-year rule, of the injustice done to them and the miracle of Kira's survival. She recounted the blood visions, the proof of Garrett's conspiracy, the righteousness of their cause. Then she called Kira forward, and the young woman climbed the steps to stand before the seat. The ancient obsidian pulsed brighter as she approached, recognizing her, welcoming her home. Kneel, Nessa commanded. Kira knelt, bowing her head. Nessa produced a crown from a locked chest. It was crimson gold, delicate but strong, formed in the shape of intertwining flames and thorns. It had belonged to the last Crimson Queen, Kira's grandmother, preserved in secret all these years. By the authority of blood and stone, by the witness of gods in court, I declare Kira of House Crimson rightful heir to the ancient throne, queen of her bloodline, protector of the realm. Nessa placed the crown on Kira's head. Rise, your majesty. Kira stood. The seat reacted immediately. The cracks spreading further, crimson light exploding outward in a wave that made everyone gasp. And then something impossible happened. The seat split right down the middle. The ancient obsidian dividing into two separate seats, one black, one crimson, side by side. Equal. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Nessa's eyes were wide with wonder. The prophecy, she breathed. The ancient prophecy. When crimson and shadow unite as equals, the territory shall know an age of peace. Thorn moved to stand beside Kira, taking her hand. This is how it should be, he announced to the court. Not one ruler dictating to the other, but two working together. Two bloodlines, two seats, one territory. Who here objects? Silence. No one dared speak against what the sacred stone itself had proclaimed. The bonding ritual followed immediately. Nessa bound their hands with crimson cord, spoke words in the old tongue that Kira barely understood, but she felt them. Felt the magic settling over her and Thorn, formalizing what was already true. They were mates, partners, bound in ways that transcended politics or duty. When Nessa released their hands, Thorn pulled Kira close and kissed her before the entire court. It was not tentative or political. It was claiming, possessive, a declaration that she was his and he was hers, and anyone who challenged that would face them both. The court erupted in cheers. This time genuine celebration replacing the tension that had gripped them for weeks. There would be a feast, music, dancing. But first, there was one more thing that needed to happen. The trials. 74 conspirators had been captured or surrendered in the aftermath of the battles. They waited in the cells, awaiting judgment. Thorn and Kira heard each case together, sitting in their twin seats, dispensing justice as a unit. The true fanatics, those who had participated willingly in murders and plots, were executed swiftly. Others who had been coerced or deceived were offered clemency in exchange for service. Some would work to rebuild damaged villages. Others would serve terms as laborers on territory projects. The goal was not vengeance, but restoration. The most surprising moment came when they discovered that 4 of the captured conspirators were themselves bloodborne. Survivors like Kira who had been found and recruited by Garrett with lies about retaking their heritage. They were young, confused, deeply ashamed when they learned the truth. Kira pardoned them all, offered them places in the keep, opportunities to learn about their true history. 3 accepted, crying with relief. The 4th chose to leave the territory entirely, too traumatized by what he had done. Kira let him go with coin and supplies, knowing some wounds took time to heal. The trials took 4 days. When they finished, Thorn turned to Kira with exhaustion clear on his face. Is it always this complicated? Ruling. I have only been doing it for 4 days, Kira pointed out. But I suspect yes. They retreated to Thorn's chambers, which were now their shared chambers. The space had been expanded, redecorated to include crimson along with the black and silver. It felt right, balanced. Kira stood at the window, looking out over the territory spread below the keep. So much had changed. A month ago she had been a healer. Now she was a queen. But the weight of it, the responsibility, was beginning to sink in. I do not know if I can do this, she admitted quietly. I was not trained for it. I do not know how to rule, how to make decisions that affect thousands of lives. Thorn came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Neither did I when my father died and I inherited command at 25. I made mistakes, many of them. But you learn, and you do not have to do it alone. He rested his chin on her shoulder. We are partners now, truly. Your strengths balance my weaknesses. My experience guides your instincts. Together, we will be better than either of us alone. Kira leaned back against him, feeling safe for the first time in what felt like forever. What happens now? Now we rebuild, Thorn said. We restore your family's reputation. We find the other Crimson survivors and bring them home if they wish it. We reform the laws that allowed the low caste to be treated as less than people. We create something new. And we do it together, Kira finished. Always together. They stood there for a long time, watching the moon rise over their territory, feeling the mate bond settle into something peaceful and permanent. There would be challenges ahead, other threats, political complications, but they would face them as they had faced Garrett and the purists. United. The next morning, Kira woke to find Thorn already up, standing over a table covered in maps and documents. He looked up when she stirred, a slight smile crossing his face. I have been thinking about your suggestion, the reforms. He gestured to the papers. I want your input on these proposals. Changes to inheritance laws, protections for low caste, redistribution of the lands seized from the Crimson family. Kira joined him at the table, scanning the documents. They were comprehensive, thoughtful, addressing issues she had seen firsthand during her years as a healer. This will anger some of the high caste families, she said. They benefit from the current system. Let them be angry, Thorn said flatly. They will adapt or lose their positions. We are building something better. Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into governance. Nessa became their official advisor, bringing centuries of wisdom to their decisions. Rowan was promoted to High Commander of the Guard, responsible for rebuilding the military and rooting out any remaining purist sympathizers. Kira found 3 other Crimson survivors, brought them to the keep, gave them choices about their futures. One was an elderly woman who had spent her life as a weaver. She wanted only a quiet cottage and a small stipend, which Kira granted gladly. The other 2 were younger, a man and a woman, both eager to learn about their heritage. They stayed at the keep, became part of Kira's small circle. The truth about the Crimson family's execution was made public. Monuments were erected to honor those who had died. The history scrolls were rewritten, this time with accuracy. Children would grow up knowing the truth, not the lies Garrett had perpetuated. And slowly, the territory began to heal. 9 months after her coronation, Kira discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she could not keep breakfast down, and Nessa examined her with knowing eyes. Twins, the old healer announced with satisfaction. I can sense 2 distinct heartbeats. Strong ones. Kira's hand went to her still flat stomach, wonder filling her. She had never allowed herself to imagine children, had never thought she would have the opportunity. But now, carrying Thorn's children, carrying the future of 2 bloodlines, it felt like everything had come full circle. When she told Thorn, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. Then he became immediately overprotective, insisting she rest more, eat more, avoid stress. Kira tolerated it because she knew it came from love. But she also made it clear she would not become an invalid just because she was pregnant. The territory celebrated the announcement. There would be heirs, children carrying both crimson and shadow blood. The prophecy was fulfilling itself in ways no one had anticipated. Kira stood in the council chamber one evening, hands on her growing belly, looking at the twin seats that symbolized everything they had built. She thought about the frightened girl in the cells, who had believed she would die at dawn, how far she had traveled, how much she had changed. Thorn came up beside her as he always did, drawn to her by the mate bond that never faded. What are you thinking about? About how strange fate is, Kira said. Not so long ago I was nobody. Now I am a queen carrying the future. It feels like a dream sometimes. If it is a dream, then we are dreaming it together, Thorn said. He placed his hand over hers on her belly. And I would not want it any other way. They stood together as the moon rose over the keep. 2 rulers united by love and destiny, ready to face whatever the future held. Because they had learned the most important lesson. Alone they were strong. Together they were unbreakable. Chapter 8. The festival celebrating the union of the bloodlines had been Kira's idea, but it had grown beyond anything she had imagined. 2 years after that terrifying night in the cells when she thought she would die at dawn, the entire territory gathered to witness the culmination of everything they had fought for. The keep grounds were transformed. Banners of black and crimson hung from every wall, and the central square where she had first transformed was filled with music and laughter. Merchants from across the realm set up stalls. Performers entertained crowds. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air. For 4 days, there would be celebration, a declaration that the dark times were truly over. Kira walked through the crowds in late afternoon, her belly round and heavy with the twins she carried. She was in the final weeks of pregnancy now, moving slowly, one hand always resting on the curve where her children grew. Nessa had warned her to rest, but Kira refused to hide away. These were her people. She wanted to be among them. People parted for her as she passed, but not out of fear. They smiled, reached out to touch her hand or her belly with gentle reverence. Children ran up to her with flowers. Elderly women offered blessings. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and Kira felt tears prick her eyes more than once. Thorn found her near the musicians, standing with one hand pressed to her lower back. He took her arm immediately, his expression concerned. "You should be sitting, resting." "I have been sitting all morning," Kira protested. "I wanted to see the festival, to be part of it." "Then let me walk with you," Thorn said, his tone making it clear this was not negotiable. "And if you tire even slightly, we return to our chambers." They walked together through the celebration, and Kira marveled at the changes 2 years had brought. The low-caste reforms she had championed were law now. No shifter could be bought or sold. All had the right to own property, to choose their own path. It had caused upheaval among some of the old families, but most had adapted, those who had not found their influence waning rapidly. Marcus appeared from the crowd, accompanied by a young mid-caste woman Kira recognized from one of the eastern villages. Her brother looked radiant, healthy, happy in ways he had never been before. He had taken his authority and built a healing academy, a place where low-caste children could learn medicine and herbcraft, could be taught skills beyond servitude. "The children wanted me to give you this," Marcus said, presenting Kira with a carefully woven crown of wildflowers. "They made it themselves. They wanted the Crimson Queen to wear it at her festival." Kira accepted the gift with a full heart, letting Marcus place it on her head over the circlet she wore. "Tell them I will treasure it, and that they are all invited to visit the keep whenever they wish." "They will never stop talking about this," Marcus laughed. He touched her belly gently. "How are my niece and nephew?" "Active," Kira said with a wince as one of the twins kicked particularly hard. "Nessa says they are both healthy, strong heartbeats. One might be high caste, she thinks. The other is harder to determine." "They will be remarkable," Marcus said with certainty. "With you and Thorn as parents, how could they be anything else?" As evening approached, labor pains began. Kira felt the first contraction while standing near the feast tables, and her hand tightened on Thorn's arm. He knew immediately, his entire body going tense. "It is time." "I think so," Kira said, breathing through the pain. "But it is early. Nessa said I had another week at least." "Babies come when they are ready," Thorn said, already guiding her toward the keep. "Not when healers predict." Nessa was summoned immediately. She examined Kira in their chambers and nodded with satisfaction. "The children are coming. It will be hours yet, but they are definitely coming." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Kira had witnessed births before, had helped deliver servants' children, but experiencing it herself was entirely different. The contractions came in waves, each stronger than the last. Thorn stayed with her throughout, holding her hand, offering what comfort he could through the mate bond. Nessa worked with calm efficiency, coaching Kira through each stage. "The Crimson bloodline has always had easier births," she said encouragingly. "Your body was made for this. Trust it." As the moon reached its peak, Kira felt the overwhelming urge to push. She bore down with everything she had, and moments later, a baby's cry filled the room. Nessa lifted the child, cleaning it quickly. "A boy," she announced. "Strong lungs, perfect health. And look at his eyes." The baby's eyes, when they opened, were violet, exactly like Thorn's. The shadow bloodline expressing itself clearly. "One more," Nessa said, passing the boy to a waiting attendant. "The second is coming now." The second birth was faster, easier. Another cry joined the first, and Nessa laughed with delight. "A girl, and she bears the crimson mark." When they placed both babies on Kira's chest, she looked down at them through tears. The boy was silver-haired and violet-eyed. The girl had auburn hair, but the distinctive emerald-green eyes of the crimson line. Both bloodlines represented. Both strong and healthy. Thorn knelt beside the bed, his hand hovering over his children as if afraid to touch them. "They are perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What will we name them?" Kira asked. They had discussed names for months, but now that the moment was here, the decision felt momentous. These children would carry the future of 2 dynasties. Their names would be spoken for generations. "Ash," Thorn said, looking at his son. "For the boy. It means strength and renewal in the old tongue." "And Ember," Kira added, gazing at her daughter. For warmth, for light, for hope. The names felt right. They presented the twins to the court the next day during the final celebration of the festival. Nessa held them both, lifting them toward the moon that hung bright in the afternoon sky. "Behold the children of prophecy," she announced, "born of crimson and shadow, united in blood." The ancient words spoke of this day. When the lost line returns and joins with the reigning house, peace will reign for generations. These children are that promise made flesh. The twin seats reacted to the baby's presence, both pulsing with light, black and crimson intertwining. It was as if the sacred stones themselves recognized the importance of this moment. The crowd erupted in celebration. Kira stood beside Thorn on the dais, watching her people rejoice, and felt a profound sense of completion. Everything she had endured, all the pain and fear and struggle, had led to this. To a future where her children would grow up knowing peace, knowing who they were, never having to hide their heritage or suppress their gifts. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Kira and Thorn took turns with night feedings, both of them bleary-eyed and exhausted, but happier than they had ever been. The twins were demanding but delightful, already showing distinct personalities. Ash was serious and watchful. Ember was curious and vocal. Nessa visited daily, monitoring their development, teaching Kira what to expect as they grew. "They will both be powerful," she predicted. "The boy carries high caste strength plus the Shadow Line's combat instincts. The girl has crimson gifts awakening already. I can sense it. She will be remarkable." The territory prospered under their dual rule. The reforms continued, slowly but steadily. Kira established councils where low caste had voices, where grievances could be heard. Thorn rebuilt the military into something that protected rather than oppressed. Together they forged alliances with neighboring territories, showing strength through unity rather than aggression. 3 years passed. Then 5. The twins grew into bright, energetic children who ran through the keep with wild abandon. Ash showed signs of his father's warrior nature, always play-fighting with the guards. Ember demonstrated her mother's gifts early, once commanding an entire room full of adults to freeze when she was angry about being denied sweets. Marcus married his mid-caste woman and had children of his own, expanding his healing academy to 4 locations across the territory. The Crimson survivors they had found became valued members of court, their unique gifts strengthening the realm. And the council chamber, with its twin seats of black and crimson obsidian, became a symbol recognized across the world. On the 5th anniversary of her coronation, Kira stood in that council chamber with Thorn, watching Ash and Ember play at the base of the dais. She thought about the frightened healer who had scrubbed these floors, never dreaming she would one day rule from above them. "Do you ever miss it?" Thorn asked quietly. "The simpler life, before you knew what you were." Kira considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Life was easier when I was invisible, when I had no responsibilities beyond healing the sick and keeping Marcus fed. But it was also smaller, emptier. I did not know who I was or what I could become. And now I know exactly who I am," Kira said, watching her children laugh. "I am the daughter of a line thought extinct, the mate of a warrior commander, the mother of the future. I am someone who survived impossible odds and built something better from the ashes. I would not trade that for anything." Thorn pulled her close, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. "Neither would I. You are the best thing that ever happened to this territory. The best thing that ever happened to me." Years later, when Ash and Ember were old enough to ask, they would sit together and tell the story. How a frightened healer had been forced to transform to prove her innocence, and instead revealed a destiny no one expected. How the seed itself cracked open to acknowledge her blood. How everything changed in that single moment under the full moon. Was it scary? Ember would always ask, her green eyes wide. Terrifying, Kira would admit, but also necessary. Sometimes we have to be brave, even when we are afraid. Sometimes we have to trust that we are stronger than we believe. "And you fell in love," Ash would add, trying to sound skeptical but clearly romantic underneath. "We did," Thorn would confirm. "Your mother saved me as much as I saved her. We saved each other." The children would grow up hearing that story, understanding that their parents' love had not been easy or simple, but hard-won and precious. That their very existence was a miracle born from tragedy and triumph combined. And when they eventually took the twin seats themselves, decades in the future, they would remember, would strive to honor the legacy their parents built. The legacy of the Crimson Queen who rose from nothing to reclaim her birthright. The legacy of the Shadow Commander who chose justice over tradition. The legacy of two rulers who proved that strength came not from domination, but from partnership. The prophecy had been right. Peace did reign for generations, because Kira and Thorn had laid a foundation built not on fear or lies, but on truth and love, and the unshakable belief that everyone, regardless of their birth, deserved dignity and choice. It was a legacy worth fighting for, worth dying for. But more importantly, it was a legacy worth living for. And as Kira stood in the council chamber on that anniversary, watching her children play, feeling her mate's arms around her, she knew with absolute certainty that despite everything it had cost, despite all the pain and fear and loss, it had been worth it. Every single moment. The end.